Lord.
How are you feeling about May Madness Part 2, the sequel?
I'm as with like all things. I guess that's kind of a weird way to put that. I'm getting sad that we're getting close to the end. Not that we still have some to uncover, but I would love to be able to live in this world for much, much longer.
I would have loved for her to have made more films.
Yeah, I watched her speech when Nichols won his AFI Lifetime Achievement Award, and it was so funny and so brilliant. It really is. I mean, obviously, and I know that we've said this over and over and over again, you know, that she should be more heralded. But yeah, it's when you look at Ishtar and the financial disaster that it was, and she's really the only person that comes out of it and doesn't come out of it, really, right? I mean, like, Hoffman goes on immediately to make Rain Man with Levinson and Cruz, wins another Academy Award. Beatty is immediately able to go in and make this huge multi-million-dollar fantasy project of his, Dick Tracy, which he still owns the rights to today, and then still occasionally will threaten to do a sequel so no one else can do that. And, you know, and you know, that wasn't a huge hit, but it was a huge picture, like it wasn't like pre-Batman 88 or anything like that, but it was still a huge like tent pole picture. There was advertising. There was 800 posters for it.
And it was a big comic book movie.
Right.
I mean,
right.
In its style as well.
Had Madonna, you know, it's just a whole thing, right? I mean, and these are guys that up until this point, up until Ishtar's point, you know, Hoffman hadn't made a film in 5 years, I think. Beatty hadn't made a film in another 5 years. So it was Tootsie and Reds.
Which Elaine May had a part in both of those.
Right.
And in their success.
Right. And so those guys take off basically from the early 80s to the mid 80s. So they're able to headline this film when they're known buddies at this point. I mean, they're obviously not nobodies, but in the, you know, consciousness of mid to late 80s films, they're old men that are that there's no reason you're dumping $5 million into their laps in 1985 dollars to star in a huge, what is going to be a Christmas release. It doesn't end up getting released in Christmas. It's going to be a Christmas release, and, you know, and expecting this to carry over. And really, it's a crazy, like, everything around it is crazy. So out of all of that, the abysmal box office failure, which was one of these things where, and we'll get into this, I know, but it was hated before it was even released. It was dumped on by its studio. It was dumped on by
its stars.
Yeah, everyone.
And the crew.
and so it had so much going up against it. And yeah, obviously it dies. It becomes a national joke to this day. It is still a thing where you say Ishtar, you realize it is one of the, you know, just notorious flops of all time in Hollywood history. And it is, and then coupled with that, it is assumed that it is a terrible movie, that it's one of the worst movies ever made. Right?
It's not as bad as that.
No, it's not. And yeah, May never recovers. May doesn't direct anything again until she directs a TV documentary about Mike Nichols in 2016. You know, 30 years later, she doesn't direct anything. Now, she does go on to...
Was that a PBS American Masters?
I think so. It might have been,
okay.
Yeah. And so it is crazy that her career was so affected by this when everyone else seemingly came out relatively unscathed. And yeah, we can get into it, but I
was going to say, yeah, we'll dig more into that.
But a talent like this who only has 4 films under her belt is depressing.
It's awful. Right. So, okay. Welcome back, Screamers. If you didn't know our feelings on Elaine May before, I think you're getting them even more now. So today we're going to talk about Mikey and Nicky and Ishtar. And these are May's last two films, other than the PBS American Masters Mike Nichols show. They again are continuations of May's kind of themes of these dysfunctional duos, but also this kind of quest for truth and honesty in a way.
Yeah.
As well. Before we get into that, do you want to tell us a little bit more about the Real House Foundation and the mini movie marathon that we touched on last time, and that you touch on in our trailer at the end of every episode, and that you stop strangers on the street and talk up
I accost them
and hand out bumper stickers.
I just park up outside of a Cinemark with a bullhorn and
You tried to make me wear that sandwich board at one point. And
right, just flip it around.
I'm like, I'm not doing this.
So the Real House Foundation just recently held its Mystery Movie Minithon number 6. We've spoken about the Real House Foundation and its mission of trying to cultivate the next generation of film lovers by targeting at-risk and underprivileged kids here in our community, providing them a cinematic experience and discussion of the film afterwards. This was all born out of a very narcissistic endeavor. I wanted to.
Of course it was.
Right.
I mean,
one, if you know me, and the two, most endeavors are narcissistic.
I was going to say,
right?
ooh, newsflash.
The altruistic reason why we do this podcast of getting back to the comic.
Do you want to get into the philosophical discussion about altruism and does it actually exist?
We'll just do a needle drop right here and we fooled you all along. This is why we're really doing this.
Ha ha ha.
No, it's funny because in the bathroom here, there is a sign that says there's like a podcast about stopping human trafficking. And then I come in here and do this and I'm like, what are we even doing here?
We're utilizing the space for its utmost potential. This is why podcast studios exist. Somebody doing altruistic good of stopping human trafficking. Hey, let's talk about movies, kids.
Look, I'm against human trafficking. I mean, if you ask me any day of the week, I'm going to say, do you support human trafficking? I'm going to say no. Every single time. I'm going to say
You're not
no.
even going to waver.
No, yeah. I shouldn't. If I hesitate, it's just because I didn't understand the question at first.
Which is fair. I mean,
so yes. So the mystery movie, so the Real House Foundation and the Mystery Movie Minithon was all born out of a desire to do a birthday party and to bring people in and to do some sort of like marathon programming of films and just have to get around and watch movies. So we've done this 6 different times now, kind of rolling through the films that we've done. Mystery Movie Minithon number 1 was Muppets Take Manhattan, and Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. So they all have kind of like loose themes. And so the idea is to show underseen or like lesser known films. Now, those 2 films were obviously fit a theme that was kind of fun just to do. Year 2, I did Electric Dreams, which I believe is a 1984 romantic comedy starring Lenny Van Dolen and Virginia Madsen and Bud Cort as a voice of a computer. It is a love triangle where an architect pours champagne on his keyboard and the computer becomes sentient and they both fall in love with a cellist that lives in their apartment building. It was one of those movies that was always showing on HBO when I was a kid, so it was in constant rotation.
Why can't they just fall in love with Virginia Madsen? They just be like, I fell in love with Virginia Madsen.
Right, especially 1984 Virginia Madsen. So, and then I coupled that with Primer, which was a very small independent film directed by Shane Carruth here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area for about $7,000 about time travel. So kind of a technology gone wild kind of theme there. The third year I did Triplets of Belleville, which is like a silent animated film about
very French,
very French, very Jacques Tati, and it about these 3 women who go on and help this other grandmother find her kidnapped Tour de France cyclist son. I coupled that with Turbo Kid, which is a post-apocalyptic thriller about a young boy who's he rides around the wasteland on a bike. So the bike theme was there on both of those. Year 4, I did Brigsby Bear, which was a film about a young man who had been kidnapped when he was a young boy and his parents who kidnapped him created this television show for him because they made him believe that the world had ended and basically the only thing that was left was this TV show. Once he gets out, he tries to recreate it. It's a really beautiful, heartwarming, funny film. Coupled that with Being There, kind of a television theme, Peter Sellers, Al Ashby. Last year, we did a Mamet theme where it was The Spanish Prisoner, which was one of my favorite films, and Heist, which is just a ridiculous Mamet, just dialogue that just falls off the tongue type film.
And with Gene Hackman in those films.
Yeah, I have been watching a bit of Gene. I mean, I've kind of like regained, and not that I ever lost it, but kind of regained an appreciation for Hackman and what he brings to the table. He's so good.
He's really good, and he's always looked about 52 years old.
Oh yeah, he did
ever since he was born. He was born like a 52-year-old man, and then didn't look like he was 60 until he was 94.
Right. It's like how Steve Martin has always looked the same, basically since he became popular and up until today. I recently saw The Royal Tenenbaums on the big screen at Texas Theater over the weekend, and just watching him in it and watching him play with Anderson's dialogue. He's so good in that. And then so this year we showed 2 films. VHS and kind of retro technology was kind of the overarching theme. Again, these are all just ridiculously loose themes. So we showed a film called 9 Days and a film called Strawberry Mansion. 9 Days is the first film by writer-director Edson Oda. It came out, I believe, it premiered at Sundance in 2020, which was obviously the worst time to ever premiere in Sundance. But it has a huge cast, and it's crazy to me that no one really knows about it.
Yeah, Winston Duke, Zazie
Bates, Bill Skarsgård, Benedict Wong, Tony Hale. It is about a man who is, for lack of a better term, an overseer of souls, that he gets to decide who, when a new birth happens, he gets to decide who gets to go down into, you basically go down and live a life on Earth. And the premise of the film is that there are a bunch of these people who do this, and you get to watch over 30 people throughout. And once one of them dies, then you get to replace that soul. And
I was going to make a joke about like picking the sperm.
Right. And that's what it is. It's kind of a look who's talking, just about 9 different
but
sperm.
existential.
Right. So over the course of 9 days, he encounters a group of people who didn't exist before this 9 days. And if they don't get selected, won't exist after this 9 days. And he tries to determine who will lead the best life and who will survive the best. Now, one of the people that was under his watch, the person who's died, committed suicide. We're not really sure at the beginning of the film if they committed suicide or not. They were in a car accident. But this eats Winston Duke. Will is his character's name. It eats him up, and he can't understand what he did, why he chose wrong. You're given the impression that Will is relatively new at this. He has actually lived a life on Earth, and now that this is his job, he seems very in tune, or like he wears all of this on himself to make sure that he's protective over these 30 souls that he's chosen. And then he's challenged by the people that come in, specifically Tony Hale, Zazie Beetz, and then Bill Skarsgård are the 3 and Benedict Wong is like kind of his partner in crime, helps him basically make the best choice. So they're kind of working in tandem, and it's just really like beautiful, poetic. Duke is so, and I'll let you talk about how you felt about it, but for me, Duke is so wonderful in this film. Ridiculously, that he's in these high profile films like Black Panther and Us, but he carries himself so differently in 9 Days. He carries himself as this really, this hulking guy who's also, but just you get the impression that under his life he was been bullied and didn't live the best life. He might have actually killed himself as well. That's never really truly. But you get the impression. It's never really said that explicitly. But he carries himself, this big, huge guy. He's probably 6'3", 250. He's just a brick shit house.
Taller than that, I think. Yeah, I think so.
And the way that he carries himself in the film, the way that he walks, the way that he runs, he can be big and looming, and he understands his size. But then, for the most part, you realize internally he is a small. He thinks of himself as a small person, and it's just really he sits there all day and watches these 30 retro television screens and goes back and forth and tries to figure out what he did wrong and how the other people that are doing this can put such awful people in, on Earth to do the bad things that they do. And it's just a really, really, I think it's one of those films that as the more you watch it, and however your philosophical and bent goes towards religion and towards souls and metaphysics and physics and whatever, I think it all kind of allows a lot of interpretation and discussion, at least.
Oh yeah, and Winston Duke is 6'5". I think he would be upset that you tried to shorten him. Yeah, but he is. In this movie especially, he is very much a gentle giant, kind of a hulking figure who is sensitive and articulate and well spoken and a thinker. To be stereotypical, you don't think about those. You don't think about Shaquille O'Neal being really kind of smart and eloquent. You just don't. However we do that, but yeah, it was. That was the first time I had seen 9 Days. It was one that when it first came out, I was like, oh, I should go see that, and then I just never did. Right. It just kind of fell off the radar, and it wasn't out at the theaters for very long, and I never thought to stream it or rent it at home. I think it does leave a lot open for discussion, especially this idea about how certain people get here and how certain people live. And I don't just mean how do they go about life, but how do they make it through the fucking day? And some of them don't. I mean, right. As we see in this film, but then the idea of this is the selection process of how people get here, of how people get to be your neighbor, how people get to be your friends, how people get to be your loved ones is a really thought-provoking and sort of delicate, I think, story.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it does a couple things just so very well. The section where they bring in the other person that does this to provide a alternative angle to the people that he's only been able, because he sees everything through their eyes. The vision that he's given is basically through essentially this their point of view. And so he doesn't really, so what they want to hide from themselves, they hide from Will as well. And so at a certain point, Benedict Wong brings in another person like Will who had chosen her
like cousin, right?
Yes. Yeah. And they end up finding a suicide note. And so it provides Will with some answers, but it really just then provides him with more questions and breaks him up. The scene where he's in the room and it's projected on the wall of her when she's playing the piano and you see the tear form over the eye. So well done. Like she never cries except when she plays, and you just see this like rainbow come up in the corner of the screen, and he's just kind of like dumbstruck by it. It's so very well done. And then throughout, as Will realizes these people that he's talking to won't be chosen, he tries, and they've been tasked with watching the world as well through the people that Will has chosen, so they can determine whether or not how they would react to certain scenarios, what they liked, what they didn't like. And Will, when he chooses not to choose them or not to let them continue in this process, he ends up creating an experience for them. So while they won't get life, they won't get to experience that on Earth. They may have just one moment. And he does two things where he builds a kind of a beach moment for one of the people, and then he builds this bicycle ride. It's so good. He brings in these screens, and part of it, like too, watching it on the screen that we were watching it on in Stage West, on kind of that makeshift screen. It's not really truly a theater, and it was just so cool.
That was an interesting connection.
Comes up, it's just visually beautiful, and it was really interesting of like kind of a lo-fi way to show this really cool aesthetic in the film.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciated the film for its, like you said earlier, this poetic meditation on a real subjective topic. And part of that is what makes a best life, what makes a life worth living, right? I mean, the partially examined life is not worth living or whatever, but this kind of raises those questions of, why this person? Why not this person?
Right. And the three people that end up at the end, right? You have Tony Hale, and you have Zazie Beetz, and you have Bill Skarsgård, who are all wildly different personalities. And of course, they're portrayed as adults in this point. So, and when they go down to Earth, they'll lost all their memories about the time with Will, and they'll live a life, basically. And they're all different. They all react differently. And the one you think, obviously, that he should choose Zazie Beetz because she's the most empathetic, and that she's the one that is the most seemingly observant. And he goes with someone who is much more hard. He's much more, and obviously in reaction to the suicide, he goes with someone who would react and is, I guess, in a much more aggressive fashion to the slings and arrows that life would throw at him, rather than Zazie Beetz, because it seems like she's more in line with, or more in tune with, the violinist and
also himself.
Right.
I mean,
right.
I think that's something that again isn't explicitly said, but is hinted at, that he was more closely aligned to the violinist and Zazie Beetz' character, and he doesn't want what happened to him and the violinist to happen to someone else. And
right.
So let's pick the guy with a little bit of edge, right? Who's going to fight back against the bullies, and not, again, like, this is kind of the beauty of this film, is you can kind of make a case for both, right, of, either decision that was made there. And that's why the subjective of what is the best life. Spoiler, it's mine. I'm kidding. We laugh because it is not true. All right, tell us a little bit about the second film that we watched.
Strawberry Mansion, when I saw it at the Oak Cliff Film Festival in 2021, and this is the type of film that I just usually end up just falling in love with. It's visually wonderful. I mean, it really is. It's like John Waters and Wes Anderson had a baby, and that baby took acid a lot. And
yes,
but Strawberry Mansion is by a directing and writing duo. One of them's name is Albert Burney, and the other one's name is Kentucker Audley, which is a great. Kentucker is an amazing first name.
That's so good.
It is about a not too distant future.
Good luck.
Right. The plot is really particularly thin. It is about a not too distant future where the IRS taxes our dreams. So Kentucker Audley plays this auditor who goes and is going to audit this older woman. She hasn't been audited in a long time. She hasn't paid her taxes, so he's going to go audit her dreams. Now, the dreams have all been updated, and the way that they record our dreams have all been updated up to like computers now. But unfortunately, this lady had never upgraded her system. So all of her dreams are recorded on hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of VHS tapes. And so as the auditor, as Kentucker is going through his audits, he starts to find himself pulled into her dreams, and actually where she seems to interact with him as an auditor in her dreams. And it turns out that this woman has discovered that advertising agencies have been starting to insert advertisements into our dreams in order to sell us things. And she, and at one point her husband, had developed this blocker. And it turns out through, as the story goes along, that the person who invented this insertion of advertisements into dreams is her son. And they've kind of been keeping her in this desolate, isolated home so that she won't unveil the plans of doing this, because no one knows this is actually happening. And then it's just this bizarre David Lynchian mindfuck of a movie, but not like in Eraserhead scariness, but much. It really is. It's like Charlie Kaufman. It really is just this whole. He starts to living in these dream periods and starts to have this kind of dissected reality between what of what's real in the dreams and what's real in his real life. And he goes off and he loses her for a little while, and he goes off into this ship that's manned by people with mouse heads, and he's fighting this demon who's trying to keep him and her chained up, and so they can't get out and tell the story. All the while, these advertisements are coming more and more aggressive in his head to try to get him to continue to buy things and to keep him in line. It's kind of inexplicable. You have to give yourself over to it a little bit. And, that was the one I was really worried about the most in the sense of like losing people. Now, everyone gives kind of grace. I mean, especially when they come to these types of things. I mean, Turbo Kid's not a film for everybody. Jason's Friday the 13th Part 8's not a film for everybody.
It's not.
By the time you get to 8, you've either bought in or you haven't. So.
Didn't that have multiple Academy Award nominations that year?
Yes. Yeah. I think Kane Hodder won Best Actor over. Yeah. I can't remember who he beat out, but maybe
it doesn't matter because he won.
Right.
No, it's like a total vibe movie. I mean, it really is. It's fun to sort of lose yourself in those visuals because on one hand, they're really cool, but also you can tell that like they're kind of held together with Scotch tape and stuff. I mean, very kind of lo-fi, but also immersive. You can try to pull like plot threads, but everything kind of loops back on itself anyway.
Right.
And it's just... Look, the main kind of like thread and theme, this idea of capitalism encroaching in our dreams, I think is hilarious and probably not so untrue. Because look, my phone just popped up with an ad for the hat that you're wearing, and I don't understand. But it's eerily kind of close to what we kind of go through and what we sort of see every day without even thinking about it. It was just really cool, and
it's so DIY from a perspective of special effects, but also really well done.
Oh yes.
To the point where it looks like you could do this on it looks very Neptune Frost-esque.
Yeah.
And so it looks like you can do this on your own, but also the way that it's animated, the way that it's put together, it has Rankin and Bass tones. It has, there's all kinds of things that fall into this that it really is just, if you're willing to kind of let yourself go for the ride of an hour and 30 minutes in this movie, I think people really dig it. And that's the type of film that I really like to bring to this, is that's a film that no one would have sought out. Like you might have even heard of it, especially if you go to Fantastic Fest or things like that. But outside of that,
if you have Mubi, it's been on Mubi.
Oh, is it on movie?
Yeah,
now? Okay,
and
so
that's how I'd seen it first. And
so you had seen it before?
yeah, I had seen it before. No, well, in Kentucky Audley is part of, he's friends with a bunch of other people. And so he was in Amy Seimetz's last film, like She Dies Tomorrow. He was in the Christmas movie, Christmas Again, I think, where he plays a Christmas tree salesman.
Right.
That was directed by someone else, like in that group. And so all these guys and what's her name? Katie Lynn Shield. And so they all kind of do stuff together. That horror picture, You're Next. Right?
Yeah,
So those guys, they're all kind of like loosely affiliated. So I knew his face. I could never. It's weird that I couldn't remember Ken Tucker.
Right.
But I was like, oh, that guy, he's in this other stuff. And he was in Amy Seimetz's Sunshine, starring with Caitlin Sheila. He was fucking great in that. So the film came to my attention through that as well. So no, I had seen it. And when you said you were worried about that, I'm like, I don't really? I'm like, it's so cool. Like,
that's just my nature of things.
Yeah.
About putting any movies together. Right?
Look, other people's opinions suck. Thanks for listening.
I've been pleasantly surprised. I mean, I know that like I said, most people are relatively, you come in with an open mind and once people are showing you something, especially like this, it's a little bit, it plays a little bit differently than it would if you're like, let's get together and watch this. And you're like, oh, fuck you. That was terrible.
Yeah. Because I mean, not to speak for your event, but it feels much more like, let's just have a party. Let's just kind of hang out and have fun. And you know what? I'm going to throw in some movies and whatever. Enjoy them. If you don't, fine. You're here for charity. Don't be a bitch about it.
But and you can always go out to the lobby and hang out there.
You can always go get a drink. Go get some more food. It's fine. But I mean, so it has that kind of air, which is great.
And I'm cognizant. I try to there are films that I want to show that aren't fun movies. I try to lend myself towards like not showing these harrowing, like just period pieces or just like overly wrought dramas. So usually I try to have a sense of fun with them, and I like all these movies. I'm not obviously going to show you. And I have it's weird that like when I'm watching them. So they either hit a mark or they don't. So if you're ever interested in what the films that I want to show that don't make the mark, that's the At Home Film Fest. So
Gotcha.
the ones that I screen during the weeks throughout the year are ones that are kind of close or things that I want to try out to see if they make it or not.
Deep End wouldn't have worked, weirdly, because part of me wants to say like maybe it would have, but that is a weird film.
I really liked it though.
Oh no, had you not seen it before?
No, I haven't.
Oh, okay. Moonlighting is really good too. I don't know if you've seen it.
I have not. So
with Jeremy Irons and
it was weird that I chose the director of EO. I was just looking for off-ball.
Skolsmaninsky. I can't say that.
And so basically, I was just looking through my Plex server just to see. I was looking at romances and kind of like then I filter them based on. Well, it's February. It's February, right? So I was looking for offbeat romances, and then I sorted by the oldest date, and then I cut out like all the 1920s and 30s stuff, and then I got into the 70s, and I was like, oh, let me look up Deep End because I grabbed it from somewhere and was just put it away as things I'll watch later. But no, I'd never seen it before. I thought it was great. I thought it was a wonderful film.
Oh, it's fantastic. Yeah.
And honestly, Deep End might have made the cut at some point. It's a little too sexually charged for that kind of crowd, especially because of I always tell people when we go into these, these are not necessarily, this is not an event. We are a kids charity. This is not a kids event though. So
right.
Obviously we're showing films, and some people might want to bring their kids. If people do, I usually end up like these movies are secret. So when you come to the event, you don't know what I'm showing. And so
unless you guess the obtuse clues,
unless you guess Halle Berry in a straw hat, which is my favorite clue I've ever done for Strawberry Mansion. Don't shake your head. That's a pretty good clue. That's a pretty good clue.
True.
And I will tell people the ratings of the films and kind of what the parents' guide is on IMDb, just in case you do want to bring a kid. But ultimately for the most part, the films will remain secret. So yeah, Deep End might make it. If you haven't seen Deep End, go see Deep End. But
it's good. Other than that, support the Real House Foundation.
Absolutely.
And if you're in the area, keep your eyes open for next year's event and other events, other ways to volunteer, at home screenings.
Yeah.
I'm charging Jason for that plug. That was not
Nothing comes cheap, right?
Well, I am cheap. That's a different podcast.
Back to our altruism. Altruism is always a narcissistic.
Speaking of weird romances, let's get into Mikey and Nicky.
Peter Falk is Mikey.
I got a terrific suggestion for you, Nick. I suggest you find somebody you can trust.
John Cassavetes is Nicky.
They're gonna kill me, Nick. They're gonna kill me.
Mikey and Nicky. On a night like this, there are no rules.
You give me that in 30 seconds, you hear me, or I'll kill you. I'm gonna die. You're not gonna die. What do you think they're planning? To shoot you in a movie house?
Mikey and Nicky.
I'm really getting the treatment tonight. Tonight's my night.
On a night like this, there is no trust.
They're gonna kill me. Honey, I'm serious now.
Well, I'm not interested.
I'm coming with you.
There is no time.
I know it for a fact they're gonna kill me. You are not gonna die.
On a night like this, there is no choice. Peter Falk, John Cassavetes, Mikey and Nicky. Written and directed by Elaine May.
Ma, if anything happens to me, Mikey did it.
How do we feel that it's not called Mickey and Nicky? And so that's because that's what I want to call it every time when I start talking about it. I want to call it Mickey and Nicky. I know that's not it. I know that's a personal failing on my part, but I just want to get it out there in case I do call it. Because when I listen back to this stupid podcast, I do find myself like saying a lot of things incorrectly. Like, and so if there are listeners out here that are like, Jesus Christ, why is he saying that again? Believe me, I get it. It's just when you start talking as much as we talk, then it becomes you get stuck on things. Like when I'm going to call Brendan Fraser, that kind of shit. I get it. I understand. I know that there's real words to use, and I'm not always using them. I apologize. I'm annoyed by it more than you are. Believe me. So
To err is human. Get your own podcast.
To get your own podcast, it's Rock and Jason.
It's not hard because we did it. That's how I know it's not hard. So yes, it's not Mickey and Nicky, it's Mikey and Nicky, and starring Peter Falk and John Cassavetes. I mean, look, two guys, and I think we'll talk about this kind of as we go, but two guys for me who are underrated, period, both as actors and Cassavetes as a filmmaker himself. Kind of looking into Cassavetes, I don't know how many times I saw things written that was like, and Cassavetes had another comeback with. I'm like, he only did, a 12 films?
Yeah,
is that
something along those lines? Yeah.
How do you have like multiple comebacks? It's not like, well, and we kind of,
and how do you
touch on this idea of comeback anyway? What the fuck is a comeback? I mean, he never went away.
And nor did he ever reach a height that you would ever say like, oh, well, he's clearly the king of Hollywood now. So like, and he's fallen off that pedestal. Let him come. I mean, this is not some sort of.
He was nominated, I think, for supporting actor for the Dirty Dozen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which no one talks about. Well, I mean, look, when was the last time you heard someone talk about John Cassavetes besides me?
Yeah, no.
Okay, yeah. That says more about like who you're talking to than it does it does us. But right, I mean, people don't talk about this guy, I think, as they should. I mean, look, when you think about like American kind of independent films, who else?
Yeah, he's the father.
He is, he's the man.
I mean, aside from people that we've already talked about, like Larry Cohen and maybe Roger Corman and like these kind of genre art, like these grindhouse people.
Right.
And that was a completely different thing, which is respectable, but not what Cassavetes was doing.
Right. But and so again, like we don't talk enough about him as a filmmaker. And I don't think we talk enough about him as an actor either. And I think a film like this shows it. And the same thing with Peter Falk. Look, at this time, this film was 76-ish. I mean, the timeline is weird on this film too, which I'm sure we'll touch on. But at this point, Peter Falk, he was Columbo. Peter Falk equaled Columbo. That was it.
In fact, he had to take a break during filming to go back to the next season of Columbo.
Right. In Columbo at this point, they were more like films anyway. And Cassavetes would sometimes co-star because they were buddies to begin with. But from 68 on, I guess 71 on really, Peter Falk just was synonymous with Columbo. That's it. And so nobody had seen him in Husbands. No one had talked about him in this, right? Later, he'll do Wings of Desire, or he plays Peter Falk as a fallen angel. Right. And I just think it's a shame because these two are so good in this film. Here's a spoiler. I love this film. I absolutely love this film.
Look, it is a better Scorsese film than Scorsese was putting out at this time. It's a better Cassavetes film than Cassavetes was putting out at this time. Mm-hmm. It's a better Tarantino film than I mean, it is a precursor directed by a woman. Which again, I don't say that as, I mean, but it was just
that's what makes it so good. That's part of what makes this film so amazing.
If you saw this movie, one, you probably think it was directed by Cassavetes. I mean, so that's one thing. But you would never guess. You would maybe Altman, maybe maybe Coppola, maybe. But you would never have guessed it's directed by Elaine May,
a comedian
who had just done A New Leaf and Heartbreak Kid, which are two subversive Mike Nichols-esque, they're two subversive, like putting men in their place comedies. And then, okay, the first 5 to 20 minutes of this movie are pretty funny, but this is not a comedy.
But and this is interesting because it is a kind of violent humor. I mean, all of the humor comes from this place of anger and this place of violence and near violence.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's funny, but the humor is so dark and so physical.
And it takes, a quick turn too. Like I think, let's just say the first 15, which I don't necessarily know if that's the quite right timeline or not, but we see you open up on on Cassavetes in a hotel room, an ashtray full of cigarettes. He's in distress and he calls his friend Mikey and he's trying to get his attention and he throws a towel out of his window at Mikey on the street. And the great line, "I came when I got your towel."
I was on the corner. I came up when I got your towel.
And so people, when they first saw this movie, knowing that it's a Lane movie, that they're laughing in this. Peter Falk, Mikey goes down to a corner, to a corner diner.
So wait, take a step back.
Yeah.
Right. So real quick, Mikey and Nicky are like small time hoods. Okay.
Yeah. Give the plot synopsis.
Yeah.
We didn't do that.
I know. We jumped right in because I'm excited to talk about this film. So Mikey and Nicky, they're small time hoods. They're also lifelong friends. They work for the same kind of outfit. Nicky is a bookie and he has a higher position than Mikey. He works like in the bank, quote unquote, the bank, right? Where the gambling money comes in, right? Where the bet money comes in. Turns out Nicky and another bookie rip off their boss. The other bookie's dead. He's been murdered. We see this in a newspaper clip. Nicky is hiding out in this kind of ramshackle hotel. And that's when he calls Mikey for help. Then it turns into this kind of like One Crazy Night film. And I'll save the kind of spoiler. We'll get to that. But this is what Mikey's like, "I'll help you get out of this. I'll help you out of this jam." And then off they go. Nicky's ulcer is acting up because he's fucking stressed because he's going to die, right? I mean, he knows that like they're after him. And then that's when Mikey's trying to give him antacid tablets. He's like, "You're going to poison me and you're going to like, I won't take it. I'll vomit. I'll make myself throw up." And then he goes down to the diner. So go ahead with that. So.
Right. So up until this point, but all of this is still pretty comedic, right? I mean, like,
because it's just ridiculous because it's like two grown men acting like children.
Right. And so Mikey goes down to the corner diner to get him some milk, essentially. Get him some cream so he can take his antacid pills so he can take them without feeling like
in his stomach.
Right. And so it's a comedy. So as he's asking for this, the diner owner's like, "We don't sell just cream. We sell them in these little jars. We don't sell it." It's like, and so Mikey's like, "I'm going to sell me 15 coffees and just give me the cream." He's like, "Well, I don't even know how to ring you up." And so you're laughing at this like back and forth because it's funny. Like Peter Falk is trying to negotiate. He wants a cup of milk and a cup of cream to bring back to his friend. And so finally he convinces the guy to just sell him the coffees and not the cream. And the guy goes to get a cup of coffee and Peter Falk just bursts into anger. He jumps over the diner counter and starts beating the shit out of this diner owner saying, give me the fucking cream, give me the fucking milk. I mean, these are not the exact words we're saying, but I mean, that's the intent. And so it shifts on a dime where you're thinking that this is just going to be another kind of like bumbling, kind of Falk-esque performance, right? And
just one more thing.
Yeah. Yeah, then he just turns into this big, huge ball of rage that's unleashed on this poor man who's just trying to do his job. He's
being a dick, though.
He's
being a dick.
That's true.
One of the things I love about that scene too is the two women patrons who are sitting at the diner, like having a donut or having coffee, and this happens, and they don't move they just like are watching with this kind of bemusement, and it's so perfect because it's kind of on one hand they're just like, yeah, whatever, this is old hat, we see this shit all the time, and they're also like these, because they're also they're two black women, two African American women, and you get the feeling they're just like crazy white boys. Like, what are you doing? Like, this is ridiculous. You guys are idiots.
This movie feels like very much like 1970s, how I picture 1970s New York to actually be.
Oh, it's Philadelphia.
I know, but
right.
Just inner city, like, just
very much. It's like flop house hotels,
right?
All night diners, people just watching things happen, and they're just like, yeah, this happens, right?
And that's still going back to May, right, where she puts all of this in her scenes, everything. She's accused of being this perfectionist, director, and never compromising on anything. But like her films are so rich with like rewatchability that it's crazy that we don't applaud that to a certain extent.
No, I mean the texture of this film. So I mean, like these two female patrons, they are stand-ins for us.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, so to be sort of like meta or whatever, it's not. I don't think it's an accident that they're women watching men, and so we are this stand-in for this female director's point of view on these men because they come off like complete assholes.
Well, they're just extensions of A New Leaf and A Heartbreak Kid, right? They're the same men in just different forms and different professions in this case.
Except they might punch you in the face.
Right. But they're still children at heart. They've never really grown up. These friendships are not friendships. This is just somebody that they've known all their lives. They've chosen professions that are alienating and causing paranoid thoughts. And so you don't have the ability to actually form any sort of real male bonding. And yeah, we're left with these men who are still just infantile as they're adults, and they don't know how to get through life. And the people that are stable in their lives, the women that are around them, their wives that are their anchors and their lovers that are their anchors are treated horrendously, but also the only ones that seem like they're of any sort of sympathy whatsoever. And Cassavetes and Falk play this so well. And obviously it's obvious that they're friends. It's obvious that they trust May and May trusts them. And so this whole thing feels so improvisational when it's not. I mean, it's all written there.
Right.
I mean,
did you see, I don't know, on the Blu-ray, there's some extras and some interviews with people, and I think it's Schlesinger, I think that's his last name, the kind of producer and the guy that's been with all of these people. He kind of comes up in all of these films. I think it was him who was saying, look, all of this was written. Every word they said was written. But the way they delivered it, the way that they were physically around each other, the way that they looked, the way they moved, that was all kind of improv. And that goes back to May just letting the camera go and letting them just, and I know that that's a point of controversy or whatever, but that's how she got her. So the scene where Falk comes back from the diner with the cream and he's running and he slips, he's not supposed to slip.
Right.
But they just kept going. And I think that that's brilliant because that works so much better than if he hadn't had tripped, right?
There's an anecdote on this movie about May. Basically, she went through like 5 DPs on this film.
Oh, yeah.
And so there's an anecdote about one night they were shooting and Falk went off to go and talk to somebody else. And Cassavetes went back to his trailer for a minute and the DP called cut. And May just lost it. And she's like, only the director gets to call cut. You don't call cut. And he's like, yeah, but they're not in the scene anymore. The actors have left. And she's like, yeah, but they might come back.
So this is, on one hand, this is hilarious and funny. On the other, it's another instance of how she's bullied on these movies by men.
Right.
And this is something I thought I'd come to later, but I'm going to touch on at least this part of it now. But throughout these first 3 films, she is bullied by men all the time. So you have the instance with New Leaf where they take the film away from her. Robert Evans is going to do the cut and stuff. You also have the instance where during kind of the court case, Matthau didn't stick up for her at all. Matthau was like, yeah, she couldn't handle all 3 of these things. And I'm like, really? Because the movie's pretty good. So, and she's pretty good as an actor. So look at The Heartbreak Kid. And did we talk about like the Neil Simon thing?
A little bit about how he had the clause in his contract and he didn't come back after a while.
Yeah, because she was like, okay. He was like, the clause was that you couldn't change his words. And so he'd come to set every day. And she's like, well, we'll try it your way, then we'll try it my way. And we'll see which works best. And eventually he just stopped coming to the set. But again, that's another act of sort of like a physical intimidation. And then you have, an instance like that where this camera worker, this DP, he's going to take it upon himself to yell cut when the director has to be close enough. It's ridiculous. And and there's more with Ishtar and stuff, which we'll save until we get to Ishtar. But I just find it incredible that no one would do this to a male director. I mean, I'm convinced, right? No one would do this to a male director. They wouldn't stand for it, or they'd be fired. They'd be gone. And
it's this weird balance of like, I'm surprised of how much she actually got away with and by her own audacity and tenacity and just self-assurance. It just seems like at some point the studio would have just stomped her out. But and the fact that she gets another chance on Ishtar, although when I say another chance, really, I don't know how great of a chance it actually was.
Right. But again, I keep thinking like if this had been a film that like Alan Arkin directed, or these 3 films, and he did all the same stuff, I don't think we'd be calling him difficult or he's got a reputation.
Or uncompromising.
I think this is language kind of reserved for an Elaine May type person. And, okay, so I'm jumping forward a little bit. When the studio was sort of hesitant to hire Elaine May for Ishtar, part of it was like, well, the only people that shoot more footage than her are Kubrick and Warren Beatty. But they would never sort of think like, oh, we can't hire those guys.
Right.
So it's that kind of idea where it's like, okay, sure. Did she help herself? Probably not. But how was she ever going to? Because she was going to have to push back all the time. She was going to have to somehow assert dominance to make her films, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the only thing that I had wished she had done was to be able to play in the sandbox a little bit better. Not necessarily from a filming perspective, but specifically from an editing perspective and putting this all together. I don't think she did herself. I think the improvisational nature of her work and waiting for that, this is how this works, right? Where you never stop rolling. You always are looking for good ideas and you're always letting the next beat play out because the gold may exist right on the horizon and you don't want to squash it. It's always, yes and, right? I mean, it's that the improvisational nature of all of it. Yeah. I wish that she could have I wish she had been a tighter editor and fit into those times. Because I think if that had happened and her films had to come out when they were supposed to have come out, and had she have not shot so much footage where she had to go through all of it.
1.4 million feet.
Which is more than Gone with the fucking Wind.
This idea of waiting for the next kind of like perfect thing, do you know the anecdote between Hoffman and Beatty? This was on the set of Ishtar, and Hoffman's trying to have a conversation with Beatty, and a woman walks by, mostly covered, but it's still a female figure. And Beatty just loses all track of Hoffman and just watches this woman. And Hoffman goes, okay, hang on, wait a second. He's like, we're mired in all this shit. Your girlfriend's right over there, but you're staring at this woman. He's like, let me ask you something. Theoretically, is there any woman that you wouldn't sleep? I mean, because he pretty much slept with every single woman in the universe. But he's like, theoretically, is there any woman that you wouldn't sleep with? And he's like, what do you mean? He's like, just if there's a woman, would you sleep with her theoretically? And he's like, well, yeah. And Hoffman goes, okay, why? And he goes, you just never know. But it's the same.
Right.
I'm making that connection between this whole kind of improv thing. Look, you keep the camera rolling because you just never know.
You don't turn down opportunities when they come. You never know when the next one will be there.
That was from the biography Star by Peter Siskin, which I will bring up again later. But I wanted to, that connection there makes sense in how you never know, so you just keep going, right?
Right. And I get it when you're dealing with actors who are also good at that, which Falk and Cassavetes were.
Yes.
And there's so much that you feel like, even though it was written, you feel like there had to have been takes. When they get to Cassavetes, when they get to Nicky's mom's grave, and he's like, now that I'm here, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do.
It's so funny.
This whole movie is just a slice of life, a day in the night of these men, and take away all of the other trappings, the mob and the assassination, and just on these two men kind of walking through the streets of Philadelphia at night together, and it's all just so if you didn't have them, they weren't mobsters. If you took away the Ned Beatty character whatsoever, this would still be a wildly entertaining movie.
Yeah.
Where they go to the bar, they go to the movies, they go to the his prostitute lover's house, and they go to the graveyard, and then they end up back at Mikey's house. It would be a great movie just as of that. But we're gifted with Ned Beatty and his assassination character.
Which Mikey is in on. Mikey is helping to set Nicky up.
Right. For the first hour, it's a is he, isn't he kind of thing. Yeah. There's a kind of a cat and mouse. But also the whole thing, that all plays into that these two men aren't really friends.
Or they used to be. And then as Mikey says, I don't want to do it anymore. I don't want to be your friend anymore.
Nicky says we're friends because we know all the things we used to do when we were kids, right? I mean, we knew each other when we were kids, essentially. Yeah. And Mikey's like, no, I knew what I wanted. I knew what. Mikey kind of pushes back against that eventually.
Well, and he says, like, we're not friends now. Like, you don't even know me. When other people are around, you don't even know me.
Right.
You make jokes about me.
He accuses him of calling him only when he's in need, essentially.
And he has a nickname for him. And right. I do love the joke of where he walks over to the table to say hi to Nicky. And as he walks by, Nicky's like, oh, wait, call that guy back. I didn't give him my order. These are the kind of friends, at least on one end, right, where they just shit on each other. They make jokes about each other. They're mean to each other. And again, I think it's more one-sided.
Right. Nicky's clear. I'm not sorry, Nicky. See, no, Nicky is right. See, and I fucked it up because I was thinking, because I want to say Mickey and Nicky. Nicky is clearly the worst of the two characters. Yeah. He is racist, and he is belligerent, and there's one really, really uncomfortable scene when they're in a bar kind of hiding out, and Nicky can't help himself. He sees two men and he starts talking to one of their ladies,
and it's a black bar.
And it's full of black.
It's a prominent black bar,
and he just starts to bow up to this guy, and I forget, calls him a black man, I forget exactly.
He makes some comment,
and they're trying to be nice, and like I think they try to understand who these men are.
They think they're cops.
Oh, do they think they're cops?
Because they're in suits and ties, and they're white. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same. Really, cops and gangsters.
There's a fine line.
There's a fine line. And I've been watching some Yakuza films lately. And so there's also those. I mean, those are really close related too. But yeah, I mean, these guys are like, look, just get because they get Mikey, like, just get him out of here. Just go. We don't want any trouble. Mikey's like, what the fuck? He leave you alone for like 5 minutes.
Right. And there's no reason to start a fight there. Those guys weren't trying to pick a fight with him.
No.
He just saw two men and decided to take a chance.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's probably what he's done his entire life.
I have had friends like Nicky.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Now, I mean, I didn't go so far as to like set them up with a hitman, but you've had friends or you have friends where you're out with them and you're like, oh shit, okay, this again. Now I got to go sort of step in and I might get my ass kicked for all this. Okay, cool. Ned Beatty's character is great. This kind of like inept hitman who Beatty
clearly is not from Philadelphia.
No, he gets lost, can't find parking, he's going the wrong way. But I love that Beatty requested that his pants were short and he'd get tailored shorter so that this guy looks even schlubbier than he does. It's a nice touch. And I think that's another part of this film that like they all understand sort of the people that they're playing in like ways to make them like just like that much more, I don't know, realistic, believable, add that much more texture to all of it.
Yeah, Beatty's line about I took this job because I thought it would be the easy one, and I'm not. By the time I get done with meals and hotel rooms, I'm not going to make any money in here.
I love it. It's great. He's telling Mikey this in the car, like you just complain, like. But this is the other thing. Like these are not like high end mobsters. These are not the people that we are accustomed to seeing in.
Or you won't see him again until Goodfellas, essentially.
Right.
And Donnie Brasco.
Right. Yeah, Donnie Brasco's a good one, I think. I mean, Goodfellas is still a little kind of elevated and like stylized, but Donnie Brasco, you see like, you know,
guys banging on a parking meter trying to get the nickels out, kind of.
Yeah, because they gotta bring stuff in, right? They gotta produce, they gotta earn. Yeah.
Is Mikey in on it or not?
Yeah,
is he? Nicky, it's a tenuous relationship throughout the entire thing. Nicky still suspects that Mikey might be in on it, and just knowing the nature of the mob. When they go out of the hotel room, they make Nicky makes Mikey and Nicky switch coats with one another, and so you're kind of led to believe as Ned Beatty is coming in, it starts to become more and more clear that Mikey is in on the hit. He starts making phone calls, letting the hitman know where they're going to be. They end up going to this movie house, and then they end up leaving it early, and the hitman gets there late, and so they go to a movie house. They go to a girlfriend of Nicky's to kind of lay low and to get Nicky laid.
That's a tough scene.
And to really kind of denigrate. This is a really good scene of how, and May frames this so, but Nicky is trying to basically put Mikey in his place in this sense. Also his girlfriend as well. But he's kind of, you get the idea that this happens a lot when they're together, that Mikey's always playing second fiddle to Nicky and to Nicky's whims. And so they go up to this woman that Nicky is sleeping with. And this is the girl on the side that he keeps, and he kind of pushes out to his friends when he wants to. And the idea is that both Nicky and Mikey are going to sleep with this girl, and Nicky's going to get first dibs. She starts talking about some political strife in Indochina, and they just make fun of her. And like, I didn't know you were political. I didn't know. And like, and they have this really awkward lovemaking scene between Nicky and the girl, and it's a wide shot, and you see Mikey in the background in the kitchen, and he's just sitting there on a chair,
like in the corner,
just kind of in a silhouette, and everything is like, and it's just this really gross, like uneasy. Yeah. And then Nicky is finished, tells Mikey to go. Yeah. To have his turn, and the girl doesn't want to have anything to do with it. Mikey really doesn't want to have anything to do with it. These are both two also married men, and it doesn't end up happening. Nicky ends up roughing her up a little bit, like it just turns ugly, and then they end up leaving. But
and Mikey lashes out because he's embarrassed. I mean, essentially, right? You're right. He doesn't want to go through it, but he's kind of like, okay, I have to, because like this is what we do as men, right?
Right.
I mean, these are very toxic men in all kind of ways, but he's like, yeah, I have to go through it. This is what we do. But he's more upset about being embarrassed. But it's such the way that she does that, where the kind of living room is dark, the kitchen is lit, and you can see the silhouette of them kind of on the floor, and Peter Falk
in the background,
Mikey in the background.
Away. Yeah.
She doesn't pull out a lot of tricks, but when she does, they're really, really well done. Like that scene, the first scene in the bar where we get close-ups of Peter Falk and Cassavetes kind of going back and forth, and all the things they say with just their facial expressions and their eyes. But a similar thing she did in The Heartbreak Kid, right? And the diner scene there where Jeannie Berlin has egg salad all over her face, and Grodin's like, what the fuck is this? And then in New Leaf, where they're at the restaurant, and she shoots them through the mirror, where we see sort of like the side of one person's head, and then we see the other person reflected in the mirror, and then she reverses it. So she'll do this like occasionally, but it not very often. When she does, it really stands out, and I think it's really effective.
Yeah, and I think one of the digs on this movie, especially from some of the critics, was that it didn't have some sort of distinctive cinematic flair to it, which I think is a completely wrong take, to be honest.
Because it's really the way that when they're on the street, when they're out on the street, and the way the camera moves with them, it's kinetic, it's energetic. This is where it's Cassavetes, like at its kind of most. And this is like a Cassavetes revision, right? This is a Cassavetes film through the eyes of a woman. This is what Cassavetes men look like to us, right?
Right.
But the camera, the way it moves, and the way it just follows, and the way it just keeps going. And then at the end, when Peter Falk and his wife are in their house, and it just stops. And then it's just like, it's a static camera, and it just is with them. I think it's really purposeful, like how she's doing that.
And I find myself like losing myself in the plot and like timeline of how it all happens. Like, but when exactly they go to the cinema and when they go to the cemetery, eventually it all breaks out where Mickey and Mikey have this falling out. See, I told you I'd do this shit the entire time. They had this falling out. Nicky breaks Mikey's watch, his dad's watch he's been had on for 20 years, and is just as Mikey's picking it up off the street, Nicky's like, "Hey, do you have the time?" Fucking brilliant lines. It's so mean.
But it's so in character because that's exactly. And he also says, "Oh, is it broken? Is it working? Is it stuck?" And he's like, "Oh,
and that's when Mickey's like, I'm done. I can't do this." And it's when he teams up and when he finally catches back up with Ned Beatty, and even then, and Nicky at that point realizes he's gone too far. He finally realizes that he's pushed him too far, and now he really is truly has no one. He's on his own. He can't go back to his wife. He can't go back to his girlfriend. They want nothing to do with him. Now Mikey is only quote unquote friend wants something to do with him. So now we shift focus to Mikey and Ned Beatty, the assassin, together. And again, even then, Mikey has trouble hunting down Nicky, and eventually it culminates at Mikey's house with his wife. They're holed up in their house. Nicky comes to the house, and the assassin comes to the house to shoot down Nicky, and that's basically it.
And there's your spoiler.
In a very, very harrowing, for a 1977 movie, in a very harrowing scene where essentially Nicky is begging and pleading and trying to break down the door and just not only like begging for his own life, but begging for forgiveness, and hopefully that his friend Mickey will come back around and open the door and help him out. And he doesn't, and and that's basically roll credits.
Yeah, in fact, they push couches up against the door to keep it. The last words in that film from Peter Falk are to his wife: "Would you go to bed?"
Yes.
I mean, this is a film about, platonic divorce, right? It's about two friends breaking up, right? Two men that have been friends for quote unquote friends forever, and they're just done. This is it. And that kind of murder scene is that culmination of the divorce proceedings. I mean, as far as metaphor goes.
And like you said, it's another one of these films that we're given a mirror to the men of these movies that and otherwise they would be champion characters in the film.
Yeah.
You're given and I know Arthur comes out later, but I have nothing to compare A New Leaf to really. But if you look at it from that perspective, Arthur is this scamp. He's just this rich little scamp, and he doesn't have murderous intentions, but he's an empty shell of a human being who's only loved by his gentleman's gentleman. Heartbreak Kid is The Graduate, shown from the other side of Benjamin Braddock is a piece of shit.
Yes.
He is a self-centered, horrific piece of shit. Yet because he's funny and it's written by Buck Henry, and we find ourselves enamored with this scamp. Mm-hmm. And then you get these other movies where, you look at The Godfather and other films where you're showing, even Donnie Brasco, right? Where you're still in love with these gangster characters. These guys are pieces of shit.
You don't, and even like the promotional poster, Mikey and Nicky, you're not gonna like them.
Right. Yeah. Right. And I don't think that we would know what to do with these movies today. I certainly know we didn't know what to do with these movies in the 70s. And the fact that they're so good and that she was able to pull this off is so very incredible. And it falls into Ishtar as well, right? I mean, it's not
100%.
But it's this subversiveness that she was able to pull off and able to basically keep control over and put these movies out. And the fact that they are as good as they are, it really, again, I don't know how many times we have to say it. Go watch Elaine May films and tell your friends about them, because there needs to be, if we're talking about renaissances for anyone, there needs to be a reassessment of her movies.
Oh yeah, and this was the first film that she wrote whole right. I mean, this is not source. This is not like previous like source material. This is based off of people that she knew growing up, right? Her family had loose connections in the neighborhood. She knew people like this. She knew these kind of small time mobsters. So this was coming from sort of direct experience. But yeah, this was her original story. And
yeah, she wrote this since like 67, I think.
Yeah, she'd been working on it and apparently had talked to, I don't know, either Falk or Cassavetes first about it. And then they saw each other at a Lakers game. And one of them said, "Hey, Elaine May is doing this film. You want to be in it?" "Yeah, cool." And that's how they kind of got there. I think initially Grodin was up for part of it.
I think he was in for Falk's role.
Was he, or was he in for Nicky's role and then Falk was like, he was too mean or something?
Maybe. I don't know.
But there's some anecdote there about like Grodin being a little too mean.
I can see that. I can see Grodin not really knowing how to play this role, either one of them. Like he's too
sardonic,
dry. Right?
Yeah, he's just I don't think he could do. But these two guys are so good in this film.
Well, and the playful scenes when they're together, when they're in the bus together, and there's clearly a camaraderie, right? There's clearly something that they shared at one point, and they're just making each other laugh and getting along, and Cassavetes' meanness, where he goes back and the lady's like, I don't have to deal with your type. He's like, oh, our type, huh? He's
I'll
like,
show you my type.
And then he gets into a fight with Emmett Walsh, the bus driver, and like tells him to step outside because he wants to exit the front door of the bus. And like, oh yeah, I'll fight you, but you got to go out the back. He's like, sure, but open the door so the lady can get in. And they all has. There's so much fun between those two characters, even though you know that there's. And I guess that's just the whole backdrop of like one of them is trying to kill the other one, but there's still these moments of like, man, this guy, when he's good, he's good, and when he's bad, he's
the worst.
Yeah, he's decent.
And unfortunately, he's not good that often.
Right. So yeah, Criterion Channel. Go definitely check it out. It's one of those movies that like I obviously seen it before, and then I watched it again for this, and I was like, I want to watch this like right before we start because there's so much depth to it, and it's a film that just it's easy to pop in and out of, but and you just don't necessarily even want to do that. It's so like tense and wonderful, and like I don't know, it's one of those things I kind of want to live in that environment because I find myself like as I start to take a step back and watch other things, I start I need to remember this or that, I want to talk because it's so dense, like there's just too much to talk about, like you're gonna miss something.
Yeah, and we're not. I mean, we could have done an entire 2 hours on just that.
It's
film.
one of those, talking about the films that have been remade, specifically Heartbreak Kid. It's funny to me that someone hasn't taken a chance at Mikey and Nicky again because it's such a two-hander, and it's such a like it almost lends itself to like a Broadway adaptation. I mean, I know that she wrote it as a stage play to begin with. Yeah. And then, but I think it would be cool to see this updated. I don't necessarily, maybe not, because those can go either way. But it's surprising to me that no one's trying to take a chance at this, especially as the Scorsese 90s era of gangster and the Donnie Brasco era of gangster. Coming back to that story seems like it would be inevitable.
It does. I worry that it would be too slick if done now. And I think, that's one thing that this film isn't, to its credit, which is why I think, at least I always make this connection to Cassavetes, is that it has that grittiness. It has that kind of lo-fi, kind of on location, verite kind of quality. And it also has these just like quick cuts from scene to scene. Because the continuity, I mean, look, it's not that there's not a timeline, but there's no real transition, and it's just cut, go, cut, go, cut, go. I mean, and Ned Beatty's character, the hitman, is really just there to help propel the plot. Right, help, cut some other scenes.
Yeah, and I guess if you look at the other film of this type that did try to get remade, which was Cassavetes' Gloria, I guess don't. That's not as successful. Right. And that's exactly what you're talking about as far as the slickness of a Hollywood remake at this point, is trying to put a big name in this role.
And let's put some dramatic music in there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm just surprised no one's tried it. Yeah. Because it does seem like such material that would be ripe for at least giving it a shot, and relatively low barrier to entry to do something like this, especially these days with the lower cost of filmmaking. You don't have to. I mean, you could film forever and not have to worry about actual celluloid.
Right. Well, and even somebody like, I'm just thinking of stylistically like a Sean Baker, right, shooting stuff on an iPhone, and that kind of grittiness that comes out of that too. Anyway, I think we're getting off like topic. Let's get back on topic and let's talk about Ishtar, the film that's not as bad as you think it is, but it's still pretty bad.
3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, and...
These men are pawns. I put a price of 20,000 dirham on their heads.
Next, they will be hailed as the true messenger of God.
They were just a couple of songwriters who came to Ishtar to break into show business.
boy. Easy boy. Easy boy.
What the hell's the matter with him? Is he blind?
Well, yeah, he is, but he's in perfect condition.
So how do they wind up on everyone's hit list?
Your life is in danger.
Behave normally. We have guns pointed at your back. No, don't put your hands up, you idiot.
Oh, little darling. My little darling.
I can't believe these men may control the fate of the Middle East.
Oh, where are you?
Do it.
This is unbelievable.
Are the two American messengers of God dead yet?
Is this the oasis?
Does this look like an oasis to you?
Yeah, look at the birds. Are those vultures?
Just for you.
He's aiming at him.
Will you stop being paranoid?
Run, Smuck! They're trying to kill us.
Warren Beatty, Dustin Hoffman, Isabella Johnny.
Your girl. How did she get to be your girl? Only you.
I think they're wonderful.
Ishtar, written and directed by Elaine May.
This is some of our best work.
Yeah, and I have the unenviable task of fucking.
Look, this can be. Look, I don't know how you summarize this film. I don't know how, because frankly, it makes no fucking sense.
I've watched it a few times, and this is like Trading Places to me. Every time I watch it, I get confused by what the machinations of.
What are we doing with the orange features?
Right. How does this all work again? I gotta take fucking notes. I gotta get a calculator out and like a slide rule. I'm whiteboarding it out. I'm like trying. Okay, here we go.
You're overlaying the map of the Middle East with a star chart.
Okay, so Ishtar is. So we open up, and I do this differently. So it's about two failed singers in New York City, Hoffman and Beatty, Clark and Rogers and Clark, right?
Yeah.
And so these guys are lifetime losers. They work menial jobs. One is an ice cream man. One is a piano man at a restaurant. And they're trying to get their big break. And they're convinced that they're talented singers and songwriters. And they think that all they really need is an agent. The movie opens up with an archaeological dig in Ishtar where where a map is found. It's supposed to be a scroll that predicts these two saviors coming into Ishtar and liberating all of the people from this fascist dictator that is currently in the country. Some leftists get a hold of that map, and they're going to be so I take that back. Basically, there's a struggle over the map in Ishtar because whoever owns that map will be able to then get the loyalties of the leftist group. Am I keeping you here so far? So cut back to New York, and we follow these two singer-songwriters basically up to an open mic night. And after we see them lose their ladies in their lives, and they've got nothing left. One of them, Warren Beatty, is about to commit suicide. They go to an open mic night. The suicide may have happened after the open mic night.
Hoffman tries to commit. Yeah, it's Hoffman who's going to commit suicide.
You sure?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Hoffman's
right.
on the ledge, and he calls, "Don't call the cops! Don't tell them I'm on the ledge."
But does that happen after the open mic night? Or before?
Yeah.
Okay. So
no. So because there's a flashback.
Okay.
And that's in the flashback.
Oh.
There's this
I may have missed that then.
It's this weird fucking flash. So they're at an open mic night.
I'm not good at watching movies.
That's okay. Their agent comes, and after watching these guys twice, the agent's like, "You guys suck. You're old. You're terrible." And they're like, "Right, we just need a gig."
He's like, "Look, what you need to do is sing movies that everybody knows," which is a great fuck you to Hollywood. Like it's just a great like Elaine May line.
So good. But he's like, "I can get you this gig in Honduras, or I can get you this gig in Marrakesh as lounge singers." And Hoffman's like, "Oh, I need to think about it." And they go to a bar
for like ridiculously low pay, like
$95 a week. Yeah, in Morocco it's $95 a week, and it's $75 in Honduras, right? But both acts, the act in Marrakesh left because they were afraid of political unrest. So they go to this bar. Well, Hoffman's like, "I need to be alone." He goes to this bar, and then Beatty walks in, and he's like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "It's only bar open." So then the bartender's like, "You guys know each other?" And then we get a close up on Beatty and we get the flashback, and then we get all that, like how they met, and then that suicide or attempted suicide scene.
And what's great about the suicide scene is how Beatty talks Hoffman off the ledge, is essentially saying, Am I ruining something?
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I love this line. Like, I love this line. I got really excited. Yeah.
And I'm going to mangle the line. So if you have it exactly, it's great. But it basically tells him, it's like, you know how daring it is to have nothing at this stage in your life? It's like it would ruin most people. Like, it really, like, the fact that you're still here is impressive. You have absolutely nothing going on in your life, and that you're still getting up. Go ahead and read the actual line.
It takes a lot of nerve to have nothing at your age.
Which is a great way to pull someone off a ledge.
But Hoffman goes, "You mean it? Really?" Look, I think that is one of the few times the humor works in this film. Because a lot of the other lines just fucking fall flat. Sorry.
Yeah, we can get into it.
Yeah.
So basically realizing that they're completely broke. They have no love lives at this point, because both of the women that were with them have finally decided they're not worth it. They decide to take the trip to Morocco. They try to take the job in Morocco. And on the way to Morocco, they stop in Ishtar. And when they're in Ishtar, Isabella Adjani comes up to Warren Beatty. She's the leader.
Hoffman.
Sorry. Yes. Thank you. She's the leader of the left. So she comes up to Hoffman and basically says, "I need your passport and I need your bag. I've got to get, and it basically kind of gets him into some sort of bizarre intrigue." And she says that she only needs it for a short period of time so she can get some stuff out of the country, and that she'll meet him back at her hotel later on, or his hotel later on that night, to give him his passport back so he can get to Morocco and get to his gig. Turns out that doesn't happen. And so he basically tells Warren Beatty to go on to Morocco without him so they don't lose the gig. So Beatty goes to Morocco. Hoffman stays in Ishtar and meets up with a CIA agent played by Charles Grodin, who convinces him to be a mule for the CIA, or a mole, not a mule, a mole for the CIA.
Because it could be the same.
Right. Because he's involved with the leftist group. And so that allows him, and Hoffman takes the gig so he can get a temporary passport so he can get to Morocco so he can get his gig. And then it's this bizarre, like, cold world espionage plot once they get to Morocco, in that the CIA is trying to keep the fascist regime in power. But there's also Turkish people there and Russians and Chinese people there. So the political intrigue it's funny, but it is completely confusing. And the CIA agent and Johnny, the leftist leader, start to turn and create some suspicion amongst Beatty and Hoffman against one another. I could never really figure out why Beatty buys the blind camel.
Johnny sneaks into his hotel room
to steal his bag.
Right, because she switched the bags, right? Because it's her brother that had the map and he was going to send it to her. And so Beatty has that stuff, and so she goes in there to try and get it, and they get in sort of like to a tussle, right?
And he thinks he's a boy. It's a really funny scene where he thinks that she's a boy.
Yeah.
And
whose breasts?
And he won't let go of her boobs.
What, are you serious? Which she in no way looks like a boy.
No, not really.
I mean, so she's supposed to be like disguised as a boy, and I'm like,
and she was supposed to like lower her voice, but she wouldn't do that. And that was like how
Beatty kept squeezing her.
Well, and that's like her and May fell out over that fact. Is that because she wouldn't do what May was asking her to lower her voice. Anyway, that's just a side note.
So she says she explains everything to Beatty, and she's like, "Look,"
but also Hoffman is now tied up with the CIA agent,
right?
So she thinks that he's acting against her.
Yeah, and so she's like, "If you go to this market, ask for Muhammad, and tell him you want to buy a blind camel, and he'll come get me, and we can talk." So that's why he goes to buy the blind camel. But that's kind of a racist scene.
It really is.
Where he's like, "I'm looking for Muhammad," and like 12 guys turn around, and I'm just like, "Oh, boys."
The line that Beatty says is pretty funny afterwards, where he's like, "Oh, you're the first guy I asked. Hit it out of the park in the first. Hit it out of the park. Hit it out of the first park in the first try." That's pretty funny.
That's funny. That's funny. Yeah.
There's a lot of like kind of tense moments, especially when dealing with 1980s version of Middle Eastern culture. Especially when you get to the scene where Hoffman is pretending that he can speak Arabic, and that is just basically Rosie O'Donnell speaking Chinese kind of stuff. So that doesn't
not cool.
age well.
Yeah, it does not age well at all.
So Beatty goes and buys the blind camel. Essentially, at this point, I think both the leftist group and the CIA agents are done with the duo, and they send them out to the desert to basically be killed. Mm-hmm. And when they get out to the desert, they stumble upon an arms dealer, and they go out to the desert and they don't actually realize they've been duped. This pair along the entire time doesn't really realize, they have no idea of what's going on. So they get out to the desert. None of the oasis that's been promised by the CIA agent and the glowing beads, neither one of those are come to fruition. So they get stuck in the desert overnight. And
this is Hansel and Gretel in the witch's house.
The CIA agents are going to send a armed helicopter out to basically shoot them and kill them and make it look like the leftists have killed them. But luckily for Hoffman and Beatty, they stumble upon an arms dealer out in the desert, and when the helicopter comes, all of the people that were buying the arms, and they start to do this thing where they're auctioning off. They're supposed to be speaking English in all the different dialects. Hoffman doesn't speak any of these, so he just does gibberish talk in a very racist way. But as the helicopter comes, all the people that were buying arms run away. They're left with these arms to protect themselves. At some point, they realize that they actually do have the map that will sway the leftists or the locals to follow whichever regime has the map. So the leftists come out and save them from the CIA. They make it back to Ishtar, and Marty Feldman, the agent, comes back and blackmails the CIA for the map in order for those guys to not only then support a communist leftist regime to take over the fascists that the CIA wanted to keep into power, but also to back Rogers and Clark's debut live album from Morocco or from Ishtar. And they actually get the album that they want. And then we fade out after the concert's over, where we see their album for sale in the United States, but it is on clearance sale, at a low price. If you're not following along, don't worry, because watching the movie,
it's a mess.
By the time it gets to Ishtar, there are some really funny scenes, but the plot is so convoluted. So when they first get when they both get to Morocco, and they're suspicious of one another, and Beatty goes out and Hoffman goes to follow him, and then you've got Turkish and CIA, and there's three cars that are following him, and as soon as one of them stops, all the cars crash into one another, and all the guys that are following them crash into one another. There's some really funny Crosby Hope-esque slapstick things. This film does not know what it wants to be, and I think that it doesn't get made without Beatty and Hoffman, but it does not work with them either.
Not at all.
And I kept thinking, okay, how could you make this movie better? And one, obviously, I think you spend significant more time in New York City.
Yeah.
You don't go the MacGuffin of the map and getting over into now. I know that this American exceptionalism and American know nothingness was part of the themes that May was trying to get across,
Sure.
So I think that there's something to be said there about them getting over into the Middle East to kind of jumpstart their career. But I think you need more setup, and I just think you need different people in those roles. Yeah. I think had you have gone with Aykroyd and Chase, or Aykroyd and Martin, or as somebody who has I just don't find either
Grodin and De Niro.
Right. I mean, maybe I don't know. No. But I mean, somebody who was who could carry the weight of the humor a little bit better than those guys can outside of their star power. Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
I like the idea of Beatty being the bumbling one.
Right. I agreed. But I think he does it better in movies like Bulworth. I mean, eventually he finds himself where he's kind of self-deprecating after Madonna's Truth or Dare comes out, and he realizes he's not really kind of the Lothario that he once was, right?
Right.
And
that he still thinks he is. Yeah.
Right. And he seemingly has a sense of humor about himself, but in this case, he's coming off of Shampoo and this huge era of where he is. I mean, heaven can wait. He is this god of he is the sex symbol of Hollywood at a particular point in time. But I never found those guys particularly funny in and of themselves. Mm-hmm. They're good with good material, and they're great actors, but they're not funny. They're not comedic actors. I think had you have gone with somebody who was more established, I mean, like look at something where Robin Williams does with, and I know he's improvisational and probably would have been problematic, but in this role, in this particular point in time, like I think he would have killed it. And if you could have put him, and he could have been he could have been either one of them. Yeah. He could have played it down and been the kind of like he did with Nathan Lane in The Birdcage later on. You just needed someone who could carry the humor, and there's pieces that really, really work. When Beatty's driving in the ice cream truck and all the kids are running behind him and he's just like singing the Chocolate Love scene. That fucking kills me. The songs in this, and one of the real tragedies of this film in my mind is that it was so unsuccessful that they shelved the soundtrack. Oh. But I would love to have the soundtrack to this movie because the songs are so funny. They are so good. Telling the truth is dangerous business is so good. The line of like life is all of our auditions for God, and let's just pray that we all get the job. Is so, like there's not many. I mean, that's a good fucking line. Man.
That song, that stuff kills me. Honest and popular. Don't go hand in hand.
Right. And like, I mean, like, obviously, I'm not saying anything new here, but that stuff is so telling, right? I mean, like, this is what this is the whole point of this movie. Also, this idea of like these people that are just constantly struggling and never giving up.
This is the kernel of the movie that I think is so interesting and so. This is why it's so bad that it didn't, or so sad that it didn't work out. This idea that these two guys are not good at what they do, but they will never stop doing. There's something to be said for that. There's something to be said for the passion that these guys have, and I'm being serious. Something to be said for the passion these guys have, even if it's chasing mediocrity. They will never give up. And they're probably a lot happier than other people doing that, right? This is when they're in their kind of element. They're crawling through the desert and they're making up a song. And then later, and they're like, oh, it's too bad we don't have a pencil. Later on, they remember it and sing it together. See, we didn't need a pencil. That idea there is so, so good and something to build on, but there's really nothing else attached to it.
Yeah. Well, I think it gets so convoluted in its espionage plot that it just muddles it down.
It makes no sense. Yeah. I mean, it just does. It's like they just completely like lost the point of it because those two guys they're supposed to be sort of almost like prophets coming in, right, to usher in this map. And there's none of, it just goes away. And then you're like, why are we here?
I get the Road to Bali aspect of it all, right? I get
Hope
that.
Crosby, those movies.
Right. I mean, but if you go and look at those movies, because they're fun.
Right, because they're...
and those guys were so good together. I think that's part of it too. I don't necessarily think too huge. Like Hope was such the great, like, I'm the less talented one and I'm the one who's going to take, but also pushing it off with some bravado and knowing who he really was, but letting Bing Crosby be like the handsome singer dancer guy and me, the bumbling comedian, but also maybe kind of the brains of the bunch. Like you've got Hoffman and you've got Beatty and those are just two huge stars. There's who plays that role, right?
Right.
And then trying to shift it up and trying to play them against type is one thing. I just don't like they couldn't. Like Grodin could pull off maybe if you put Grodin with something like you said, Grodin with De Niro, right. I know you're being facetious, but where Grodin could have been the Beatty role and somebody else, like if you'd done Robin Williams in the Hoffman role or vice versa, whatever. Right. I think this works.
Grodin. That wouldn't be too far from Grodin's character in The Heartbreak Kid. He's not as smart as he thinks he is, right? He's not as smooth as he thinks in that kind of work.
Yeah, this gets so. And I don't think May, of all the things that she is, at which she is good, I don't think this action, which obviously never really devolves into an action movie, but these action scenes and the way that she's shooting these desert scenes really doesn't lend itself to her style. Mm-hmm. There's a scene where Hoffman and Grodin are talking and Hoffman has the camel. He sent Beatty off because Beatty's afraid Beatty's going to be recognized. So Beatty's going off to put his headdress on. And Grodin just says to Hoffman, like, move the camel. He's like, what are you talking about? He's like, move the camel. Right. And as he panned down, he's like, it's on my foot. I don't know. There's those things like that. Like that silliness. Like it never commits, right? Right. It never commits to a Road to Bali type humor, and it never really then goes to some sort of like it never like leans into its espionage plot either. So you can't believe either one of them.
It's like caught in between everything.
Right.
And this is a moment where I think, or this is one reason I think the humor doesn't work. I think Grodin, they're all turning up. They're all turned up to like 10.5 on a scale of 11, where, the reason the humor works in all those other movies is because it's quiet. They're not cranking that up, right?
Yeah,
they're not winking. There's never a
nod to the audience, right?
And Beatty and Hoffman, I don't think can do that. I think it's always like full kind of blast, especially with Beatty in this film, where he's just like, listen to my accent, right? I'm from down south, and you're like, but you're not, and like we can tell. And in some of the jokes that Grodin delivers, he does with this smirk. He's just like, you see what I'm doing, right? And I love Grodin, and I thought like in The Heartbreak Kid, he didn't have that smirk, and if he did, it was a different kind of smirk.
Yeah, there are moments.
There are a couple. Yeah, there are a couple. Like the line about it takes nerve, to have nothing at your age.
I'm putting love in my will. Like that scene is the piano scene where he's singing to the couple who's on their 50th
but it's the
wedding
music.
anniversary.
It's the music stuff that's funny,
right? I know it sounds weird to say this about two people who aren't good at singing and aren't good at. I think someone who would have been slightly better at carrying a tune and slightly more believable.
But if you remember,
as well.
They told their agent, "We're songwriters.
That's true.
We don't want to be singers. We're songwriters. They want to write and sell songs." And then the agent goes, "Well, don't you think the Beach Boys are songwriters?" And they're like, "Oh, okay." but yeah, and I think that's. I agree with you. They probably should have been a little better, right? But you can tell like Beatty's character does not want to be on stage. He's so stiff and just kind of robotic when he's up there. I do love the scene where he's in Marrakesh by himself, starting that gig, and he's like, "Tonight, we're going to do a catalog from Simon and Garfunkel." And no one says anything. He's like, "Yes, I love them too." Right. And he's just got this whole thing like memorized, this program that he's going to go off of. So just holler out your hits from Simon and Garfunkel. And of course, they're like, "That's Amore." And he's like, I think, those are moments, but they're just so few and far between. These moments of humor that actually kind of works in the movie, and those are different movies.
Yeah, they really are.
The funny part is like the lounge
in New York, right? If you had stayed in New York, and I don't know what. Again, I think you try to do too much, and you try to be too clever for your own good to us at a certain point, right? Because these are Mickey and Nicky as lounge singers, or Mikey and Nicky. Goddamn movie name wrong. These are Mikey and Nicky as lounge singers, right? Maybe a little bit more of a tender friendship. But if you stay in New York and you get Carol Kane and I forget I forget her last name, who plays the love interest for Warren Beatty, and you show more of that dynamic, you show more of the themes of them building their friendship and like picking one another up.
Tess Harper,
thank you. Then picking each other up after failure. And then try to figure out some sort of espionage or some sort of like intrigue plot in the United States, even if it has to deal with Middle Eastern themes or something along those lines.
It's like a mob thing.
Right. I get the Road to aspect, but you got way too tied into the Road to aspect, and you completely lost it. Now, out of all of that being said, I don't believe this is a good movie. But I don't necessarily find it. Obviously, it's not one of the worst movies ever made, and I don't actually find it an unenjoyable movie to watch just because of the things that are fun about it. I do just find it when I'm sitting there watching it again, and I was watching it for this podcast, and I was just like, I still don't. This, it falls apart because there's four entities and nothing is really all that well explained. And so that it's like, okay, there are funny bits in here. And when the military comes at the final end and they know that they've been like duped and they have to do this to support this concert album, and all the military guys are told to applaud and they think that they're a hit. There's a beauty to that. It's just a muddled mess. Yeah. But overall, I'd say it's entertaining to watch. And it's also one of those movies, like it's one of those things where I think you should watch it just so you can get the idea of what actually happened to it. I mean, to me, I grew up right around I was preteen, right? This was coming out. There aren't many movies that had this much, people wanted this to fail before it came out.
Yeah.
And I can only think of a couple of other times where this actually happened. I think it happened in Waterworld. I think it happened with what's the Ben Stiller, Jim Carrey
Cable
guy? And it happened with Last Action Hero.
And Mikey and Nicky.
And Mikey and Nicky. Yeah, it happened to Elaine May throughout her career. So, but this like negative press and like, oh, how can this possibly be good? It's gone over budget. It's complete departure from what they've done in the past. And like people were predisposed to hate this even before it came out. And they were already thinking, well, okay, this is going to be one of the worst movies. So like if you go into this movie thinking it's going to be one of the worst, well, now you're going to be kind of pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
But going into this in 1987 and you're like, oh yeah, this is terrible. Also, this movie opens up at number 1, but it barely beats out the gate, which is a low budget horror film, a fun little horror film starring Stephen Dorff. And then the next weekend, Beverly Hills Cop 2 comes out and it gets obliterated and it's done. It's done. And then it becomes but it was a national punchline even before it came out. And Elaine May's career is over. That's it.
Yeah. And a lot of that is like all of the background. I mean, this movie is more famous because of this, right? Because of the negative publicity before it came out and because of all the stuff happening on behind the scenes. Peter Siskin wrote this biography of Beatty called Star, and in 2010, Vanity Fair ran an excerpt from that book about Ishtar called Madness in Morocco. And frankly, it's kind of a sexist, misogynistic piece. And it's almost like a hit job.
Really?
Elaine May. I mean, it is.
Oh, okay.
Look, I mean, I read it and I'm like, so everyone's just like, yeah, it was her fault. All of them. So Beatty takes no responsibility for getting involved in the editing room. Beatty takes no responsibility for trying to be a white knight and like, oh, Elaine May needs me to like do this for her. I find that kind of problematic to begin with.
Sure.
Right? That he's like, I'll have your back. And he goes to the studio and he's like, whatever she wants, right? I'll do this. And
but he also then at a certain point requires every scene to be shot twice.
Right.
According to her and according to him, which obviously then balloons the cost of the film.
Yeah. And she's the only one destroyed from this. Right.
Yeah.
And so even the men were much more vocal about May than I think May was about these guys. I haven't heard a whole lot from her, at least not with as much vitriol as the men have sort of. And Hoffman's kind of in the middle, right?
Right.
Hoffman's sort of like, well, I played intermediary between everybody. I was trying to like keep the peace. But the cinematographer was like, she didn't know what she was doing, so I had to trick her. And I just find the way that they talk about this just terrible. And that, Beatty went into like the studio, oh, she can't direct. I was like, what do you mean she can't direct? You know she can direct. Stop saying this shit. And then the guy, it was Guy McCune, who was like the head of the
Columbia.
I think it was Columbia, right?
Yeah.
He was like, well, I had lots of conversations with Elaine May about this, and she promised that she wasn't going to misbehave. And I'm like, you don't talk to you don't talk to a male director like this, right? You just
What's
don't.
misbehave mean?
Right. Look, other people would be called meticulous. But they're not going to call her that. So, I mean, of course, look, she probably should have been in touch with the editors more. I mean, there's all these stories about her, like not communicating with people, not telling people what she wants, or having all these different ideas. But again, this was not a movie that lended itself to her style of improv, right? Her style of, no, let's just try this. Okay, I got a new idea. And especially with this cast.
Right. It's one of those, like, you would think, if this movie had to come out in Christmas time when it was supposed to come out, I don't think the vitriol would have been quite as loud. I don't think this is going to be a successful film no matter what you do.
No.
But if it comes out on time, I think people go in and go, all right. Didn't really work. But if you look at the other movies that were come out in like Christmas of '86, there wasn't like anybody in a huge blockbuster hit. There was like The Golden Child was like the big so I mean, like there were these movies that were kind of middling in that era. I was thinking about this today, and I don't want to go down this tangent necessarily. We can come back to it. But like thinking about the '70s and thinking about the '90s, and then thinking about the movies of the '80s, like what really was like, what's the defining besides John Hughes? What's defining of like the '80s? And the '80s was really kind of a dearth of like filmmaking. It was just like there was really no true like underground cinema, and if there is, it wasn't happening in the United States. Right. Put that aside. Put a pin in that. I apologize for completely diverting.
That's a separate.
But had it come out and the studio then doesn't sandbag it, so it finally, and it finally comes out in '87. It's also one of those things too. Okay, it didn't come out in '86. How long do you let Elaine May? Like, you already have it in the bag. I know it's cost a lot of money. I know you don't want to continue to put Elaine May up at some LA hotel with editing equipment forever. But it makes you wonder, like, and I know that artists eventually have to let go of things, but were she able to finally have access to all of the footage that she shot? What comes out of that? Is there a better film that comes out of this? And because it was because at some point they just said, stop.
Yeah.
Stop, and we're going to release it. And, it got good. It had good reviews. Not reviews, but like good test screenings.
Yeah. And I think Beatty was like, this is one of the best previews I've ever been part of.
Right. And then, like I said, but so if it hadn't have been sandbagged and people had gone in it with B- C+ reviews, I don't think we'd be talking about it anymore.
Yeah.
It would just be another film. But Elaine May would have made something else. I mean, Elaine May would have been able to show that she brought in a $40 million film. That granted, it wasn't supposed to be that much. It was only supposed to be $25 million. But when you give Beatty and Hoffman $10 million off the top, and you shoot and like it was all weird too. You read about studio interference and just the studio system at this particular point in time. It's fucking amazing that any film ever gets made.
Right.
Like Coca-Cola was involved at one point
because they owned all that. Yeah.
Right. And then they get out like 2 years later because it's
we don't want to be in the entertainment business.
Volatile.
Like, what do you think you were getting into?
You hear things like, well, Elaine May was looking for the perfect sand dunes, and then when she couldn't find them, she commissioned someone to flatten a 1 square mile for a cost of $75,000. Okay, yeah, but honestly, I talked about on the Gilliam podcast. It was like, I do think that there are directors that are better reined in, and so it may be a little unfair for me to say this about May, but I think the environment of these movies is that no one ever questioned how much something cost.
Right.
Like there wasn't anybody ever going to, hey, Elaine, this is going to cost $75,000, and maybe we should just go ahead and shoot what we've got. When you're already up against this particular, I mean, I don't know, but it seems to me like this was a production that had Hoffman, Beatty, and May on it, and they were like, what's ever going to come out? It's going to come out good, so we're cool.
Yeah. And then, what do you think is going to happen if you give someone carte blanche? They're going to keep...
Right. And so could Elaine have played, like I said, I wish she had played better in the sandbox. I wish she had had the foresight about her career, which is not for me to say, obviously. But I mean, if I'm from a fan of wanting more output, it would have been great if she could have turned in movies on time and been a little bit more judicious in her editing, so that her career, because I think if that had happened, you don't see quite the ballooning costs, but also at least they show, because at almost every juncture, a film has to be taken away from her and eventually released. Yeah. I don't know about The Heartbreak Kid, but I know for sure, I mean, obviously in the other three, they eventually just said, look, we've got to release this. We can't edit it forever. And so what are we doing? Yeah. And so had she been able to deliver a final cut and not been, and been able to compromise with herself on her vision a little bit, which ultimately ended up happening anyway, maybe we get more Elaine May films. Which is obviously, I'm not trying to put blame on her. I'm just one of the wishes that I had.
No, right. And I think part of that is that, with A New Leaf, she never really intended to do this. Right. Nichols went off explicitly to make films, and Elaine May wrote plays, screenplays, and that stuff. I mean, it was almost sort of like, she almost kind of backed in to the directing part. I mean, she sold the script, she sold the screenplay, and then her agent got the deal to direct. And so we've talked about how she, that first film, she didn't quite know, I got to shoot coverage. What's coverage, right? And so, I mean, you can see how the editing probably got away from her too, where she's like, I want to make it this way. I'm not quite sure how to do it, so I'm just going to keep going and going and going. And I think once somebody comes in once and takes your stuff away, you're going to hold on that much tighter. She had a clause in her contract for Mikey and Nicky that gave her final cut. Now, when I think 20th Century Fox had the film first and then dropped it, and then Paramount came in, they ended up negating that clause. But I think that she's like, no, this is mine, and I want control here. And I think that sticks.
Yeah, I think what happened, I read something about like Columbia was threatening to take it away, and she sold it to Falk's production company.
They bought it back.
Oh, they bought it back.
So they took it away from her at the end and put this cut together that was shit. It was terrible. Apparently, continuity was just like all messed up. And so and it's Schlossberger. Anyway, the three of them, Falk, Schlossberger.
All the Schlossberger fans are out there going, it's Schlossberg on, motherfucker.
I know.
Jesus Christ.
Like, don't you have this written down? It's like, I do, but now I can't find it when I need it. So he put together like his own production company, and then May and Falk went and bought back the rights. And then she put the cut together and eventually like screened it at MoMA. It's like a retrospective, and now we have, the Blu-ray from 2019 and stuff.
Right.
So that's how that worked out. I just, I want to go back to this quote that I said, because I actually found the direct quote. But Siskin says something that I think is really bad. So he's talking about Guy McElwain And he said, I spent a lot of time with Elaine and she assured me she would not misbehave, unquote. And then this is Siskin's words. This was like asking Amy Winehouse to go cold turkey.
Fuck you.
That was my exact point. So fuck you, Peter Siskin.
This was like asking. I mean, obviously that's a terrible analogy for on both sides of it. But I mean, like, but also just fuck you.
But the whole article, that whole excerpt has that kind of tone. And so I just think that like
the idea that she's this problematic director who never knew how to, like, if the 4 films were just pieces of shit, right?
Which they're not.
Which 3 of them are brilliant and 1 of them is okay.
Yeah.
And 1 of them is okay and has brilliance just bubbling up underneath it. I don't like Ishtar. I'm not going to come out and defend it. But like I said, the one lament is that if there was a soundtrack for Ishtar, I would own that soundtrack.
Yeah,
it is. I would love to hear those songs, especially as the end credits roll and you get the actual full orchestral production behind "Dangerous Business." It's so much fun.
Truth is a bitter herb. That's from the outtakes.
and yeah, because I want to hear Beatty's "Chocolate Love Song." I just want that. Knishes
that was
and kisses and strawberry kisses and knishes.
That was a really good scene.
Well. Alas. So it, I don't know. I don't have any other like final thoughts. I just, it's.
Yeah, no, I think we should give the people what they want.
The end of the podcast.
We should give the people what they want, which is other movies to watch if they like.
If you like.
Recommend it if you like.
Did you want to start or do you want me to go first?
I'll start and I'll get the one out of the way that we already talked about that I told you not to bring up, but you already did. My first...
Wait, I brought up the people that were in it. I didn't bring up the actual name.
Yeah, but everyone knew.
Did they?
Yes. Everyone knew. Everyone knew. So my first recommended if you like, and especially if you like or didn't like Ishtar, is Spies Like Us. With Dan Aykroyd and Chevy Chase, who play these 2 bumbling, idiotic government employees who think they're spies, but are really just rubes and pawns in like a Cold War game.
This is another. This is closer to the Road 2 movies than obviously Ishtar is, yeah. And it plays with people who have comedic timing and know how to play against one another. And all of the other people in the movie play it 100% straight.
Yes.
Right. So it's. I wouldn't say like Spies Like Us is a solid B-. Right. I mean, it's not a great movie necessarily, but not to shit on your point. I'm not trying to shit on your
God,
choice.
no shit, man. Wow.
Go and watch it. I haven't seen it, but I haven't seen it in a minute. But it definitely knows how to play that. Crosby and Hope aspect more than Ishtar does.
But I didn't want to do the Road 2 films because I could be like, just go watch the Road 2 movies with Bing Crosby and
right. I don't have a Road 2 either.
so I was trying to find something.
Road to Bali is probably the closest out of all of them, and I have not seen all of them. I've read all of the.
But I mean, these are themes, and that's what May wanted to do, right? She wanted to make her own like Road 2 movie. Anyway, Spies Like Us is great. I love those 2 guys. Maybe less so now than I did when I was a kid, and I didn't know anything like about Chevy Chase or Aykroyd's subtle dig at the EPA and Ghostbusters, because the environment's important. So I still don't understand like the dig of the Environmental Protection Agency. So, I mean, I understand this man has no dick, but
this Ishtar is being made the same time that Three Amigos is being made, which is another movie that's not that great and did not get great reviews when it came out. But man, if you'd have put Martin and Short in the Beatty and Hoffman roles,
see, that would have
because again, you put Martin in the Hoffman role and Short in the Beatty role. Man, that's a movie I'd want to see. Now, again,
how do you know that's a male plane?
You can see his balls. You can see his balls. All right.
Yeah. Okay.
Spies Like Us.
Yeah.
I like
Go watch it. Okay.
My first recommended to you is American Buffalo, directed by Michael Corrente. And it's a Mad film it stars Dennis Franz and Hoffman. And it's very Mad. It's a two-hander. It's a three-hander actually. But it's mostly Hoffman and Franz. It's about this pawn shop owner who gets taken for a ride on a guy who buys a rare coin off of him, but kind of lowballs him. And Hoffman and Franz devise this plot of trying to get back at him, but they're basically 2 lifelong losers as well. And that movie doesn't quite, like, as a film, I would love to see it on the stage. As a movie, I think it would have been better served had Mamet directed it, because it doesn't quite stick its ending. But I love watching Hoffman like just eat up Mamet dialogue. It's so well done. He's so good in it. But by the time you get to the end, I'm like, I don't really love that movie, but I do find it really intriguing to watch Hoffman do Mamet.
Yeah, that's a good one. All right, my next one is, and this is an easy one, but whatever. Husbands by John Cassavetes, 1970. Again, Peter Falk stars, John Cassavetes stars alongside Ben Gazzara. And the story is that after the death of a common friend, these three married men spend a couple days hanging out, drinking. They abandon their lives. They fly off to London. Two of them come back. One doesn't. I mean, again, like similar themes. You know, male friendship, midlife crisis, this kind of, breakdown, this kind of like looking for, self-exploration, self-examination, that quest again for like truth and honesty and how that.
Yeah, it plays so well with Mikey and Nicky too, because just talking about what May was able to do was to show the other side of these people that I don't know if Cassavetes actually tapped into really either. The ugly side of all of these characters.
And there are ugly moments in Husbands.
Yeah, for sure, sure. But to really kind of lay bare Walter Matthau and Charles Grodin and these guys.
Again, I don't think another man could though, right?
No, I don't think so either.
That's what's so great about, and this is, I mean, Mikey and Nicky next to Husbands, and you can see like the grittiness in both and how they're both kind of cut. I mean, because they're all like short vignettes, right?
Right.
I mean, and they all build up to something as a whole, but they're very similar and they're in like kinetic energy. I immediately went from Mikey and Nicky to Husbands. I just watched one right after the other. And I was like, oh, I'm such a sad man.
My number 2 is She's the Lovely, which actually goes by She's So Lovely because they had to change it because Cole Porter sued. But She's the Lovely, which I will continue because when it got released, that's what it was called.
She's delightful. She's delightful.
Yeah.
She's delightful. Sorry.
No, please go on. So this is a movie directed by Nick Cassavetes after John passed away. John wrote this movie. Stars Sean Penn, Robin Wright Penn, and John Travolta, all in great turns. It's a movie that you're not going to like any of the characters, but basically Robin Wright Penn and Sean Penn are in this kind of husbands and Mikey and Nicky like type lifestyle where they're low level hustlers, live in bars. Sean Penn has a mental illness, and Robin Wright Penn gets into an altercation with James Gandolfini, a young James Gandolfini, where he rapes and beats her, and Sean Penn's character essentially loses it. Goes on the run. The mental institution goes to pick him up, and he shoots one of the people from the mental institution. He ends up there for 10 years. But in that time, when he thinks he's only going to be, he doesn't really realize he's been there for 10 years. He thinks he's only been there for 3 months. He has no spatial awareness because Robin Wright told him that he was only going to be there for 3 months. In that time that she's gone off, and she was pregnant at the time of the beating. So she has his child, but she's married John Travolta, who's this he owns his own construction company. He has got a couple more kids, and now it's all about when Sean Penn gets out of the mental institution and him coming back to reclaim Robin Wright Penn and restart their life. And it's just this inner dynamic. And it's not an easy necessarily film to watch. But like three people who are at the top of their game, and John Travolta, like really at the apex of like his renaissance after Pulp Fiction, and like really picking juicy, good roles to be in, and he's still John Travolta-esque, but I don't know, it's kind of muted in a way where it's not, where you can still see the good acting chops, where it's not kind of quite as a parody as such, and not Face Off-esque, which I like Face Off, but I mean, it's not to that.
And you like Peaches too. So.
Yeah.
So was this?
I don't know about you, but
was this the sequel to Hurly Burly and the prequel to I Am Sam?
Why you keep shitting on Hurly Burly? All right, I like Hurly Burly. I didn't like I Am Sam.
I'm sorry. I'm just
but yes, I mean, like I am. Like you, and it's weird that he goes off to 97, 96, 97, 98. Those are wonderful times for these like small little films that
really
that you were going to get big stars in. That in turn do these really star performances. I mean, yeah, the scenes with Sean Penn never obviously gets to the I Am Sam or, other sister kind of level. And fuck you, man. Hurly Burly's all right. Like, no one else will like it. But, when you sit down at Mystery Movie Mini-Thon number 7.
And Hurly Burly comes on.
Like,
yeah.
Yes.
You're like, this is just like She's So Lovely, except it's Sean Penn, Robin Wright Penn, and Kevin Spacey.
And Chaz Palminteri.
And there's a lot of cocaine. Okay.
That's going to be the next film the next theme is Kevin Spacey. On this thing.
I thought you were going to say the next theme is cocaine.
I could do that as well. That's the easy one.
Too easy. Yeah, too on the nose. My third and final recommended.
Now we've veered into Ishtar territory.
We have. Telling the truth is bitter. My last one is Cutter's Way.
All right,
Or also known as Cutter and Bone. 1981, Jeff Bridges, John Hurd, directed by Ivan Passer. Bridges sees a body being dumped and then decides to expose and blackmail the man he thinks is responsible with his friend, Alex Cutter, who's played by Hurd. Again, another dysfunctional duo, this platonic relationship about two men who are in their own different ways toxic to everyone around them. It's really good. Fun City Editions put out a Blu-ray of this that's worth looking at, worth checking out. Radiance Films in the UK also partnered with them to put out another one there. But it's such a, I don't know, it's a dark movie. It's a sort of post-Vietnam paranoia kind of film.
In this era of
young Bridges.
Yeah. In this era of media disappearing, I do find it nice that there's all of these boutique houses that are buying up properties.
Yeah. Have you checked out Radiance Films yet?
I have not.
So they're out of the UK. They're pretty new, but they're doing, US releases too. But they just released A Woman Kills, which was this lost French film, like forever. They're doing some, Yakuza honor films. And like they did a Blu-ray version of She Dies Tomorrow that's only in the UK right now, but like really cool stuff and like really nice packaging too.
Right.
So,
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah.
My third is Robert Altman, 1974 California Split with Elliot Gould and George Segal.
Yeah.
Elliot Gould is this lifetime gambler, hustler. They're at this table. They're at this poker tournament, and Segal is dealing. They basically get caught up in this what appears to be a cheating scandal, although they weren't cheating. And they get rolled by a guy who accuses them of cheating, and then they Segal gets enamored with the lifestyle, and Elliot Gould lives with a couple of prostitutes, and he's always basically on the make, and he just pulls Segal into this. He's a reporter, and he pulls him into this lifestyle, and Segal gets completely wrapped up into it, and then at the end finally realizes that it's empty and hollow, and Segal goes on this heater and wins $82,000 after being down, and he was up and then down and then up again, and it's just it's like Mikey and Nicky in so much that you're just dropped into the lives of these men. I mean, there's
a whole world.
Altman was perfect like this, where he did the same thing. Even with The Long Goodbye, where there's a Philip Marlowe plot around it, you're still just kind of dropped in, and you're expected to pick it up immediately. Gould's so great in just kind of embodying that everyman, but also kind of this like this guy who kind of owns the world around him, but also is like living on the fringes. And you're just dropped in this life. You go from racetrack to casino to betting on boxing, and every time it becomes this more and more. But also every time you get to a high, the lows get lower and lower. There's a scene where Segal, very much like in Mikey and Nicky, there's a scene where Segal is going to sleep with one of the prostitutes that Gould lives with, and he finds out that he can't really do it, and like he gets interrupted and like kind of runs out of the room in shame. And then he comes to, at the end, he is on this huge role in Reno at the craps table, and this lone woman comes up and it's like, I'm going to put $1 on 7. It's my birthday. I'm going to put $1 on 7. And the entire table. And Gould's like, here's 100 to nut, and just to go away and the entire table is just yelling at her and screaming at her. And Segal rolls again and rolls a 7. And they're like, you bitch. And he's like, I don't care. It's my birthday. I won. And she picks up her $2 and leaves. It's just such a fun like movie, like again, to pop in and out of, and like to live the lives of these characters. And Segal and Gould are just great in their roles of like just being these everymen, kind of like unassuming.
Segal's another guy I think who gets lost to history, who gets lost to sort of like Just Shoot Me.
Yeah, and which was actually not a bad series.
Right. But I mean, I think when I hear George Segal, I immediately think of his role in that sitcom rather than Born to Win, right, or that movie, or The Hot Rock, or Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. I mean, I completely forget that he was hot. He was a hunky looking dude, man.
Another guy who could have played in Ishtar, I think, we could have played off those roles.
Yeah.
Again, So going back and how let's get the Ishtar remake up and running. We'll let May direct it again. We'll just help her out with a few
I love it. She's like, guys, thanks for thinking about me, but fuck off. She would say it in a much funnier way, but I mean, essentially just that, right?
Ishtar 2.
So next time, Screamers, tune in when where we will be talking about Lost in Translation, Her and Sofia Coppola and Spike Jonze, and our obsession with the two of them and their MTV romance. We'll also be talking about Skinamarink, where two kids get stuck in a house with no windows and a weird voice coming from upstairs. Other than that, that's all I got. What about you?
No, that's it for me.
All right, thanks for listening.
Keep screaming. You have been listening to Why Does the Wilhelm Scream with your hosts, Brock and Jason. If you liked today's episode, do us a favor and rate, review, and subscribe in whatever application you use to consume podcasts these days. You can reach us by visiting whydoesthewilhelmscream.com. If you are in the DFW area, we would love to see you at a Fort Worth Film Club event. You can learn more about those and find a full schedule at fortworthfilmclub.com. And you can learn about my foundation and how we are trying to foster the next generation of film lovers at realhousefoundation.org. That's REEL housefoundation.org. Till next time.